I want you to think about the last time you reached for your phone before you got out of bed. Or the last time that you poured yourself a second cup of coffee, not because you wanted it, but because you needed it. Or the last time you opened TikTok just for a second and came out 40 minutes later on the other side, not even aware of what you had just watched. That's not weakness. That's not laziness. That's not a character flaw. That's a perfectly engineered response to a world that was built intentionally to keep you consuming, to keep you stimulated, to keep you numb enough that you stop asking the question that actually matters. What am I actually hungry for? Today we're going to get into all of it. The science, the system, the soul of it. Welcome everyone to the Unpopular Teacher, where we discuss the lifelong journey of the great unlearning, which is really a practice where we unlearn what was passed down to us, taught to us, and transferred to us. We are unlearning all the old habits, the old processes, the old reactions, and the old triggers to discover who we truly are underneath it all. I'm your host, Annie Lee, and today we are diving into episode 9. And the topic of today's episode is stimulation versus nourishment. We're going to talk about what it actually means when we look for stimulation in place of nourishment in our daily lives. Why we do it, how the world around us profits from it, and what it actually looks like to come back to what truly fills us up. So grab some water, not your third cup of coffee, and let's get into it. So first, let's define our terms, because when most people hear stimulation, they immediately think of the obvious stuff, right? Alcohol, drugs, caffeine, sugar, porn, mindless scrolling. And yes, all of those things count, but I want to expand the definition today because we are missing so much of what's actually keeping us stuck. Stimulation is essentially anything that triggers your sympathetic nervous system. Anything that revs the engine when the engine didn't need revving. And when I put it that way, think about how much of your daily life actually qualifies. Gossiping about someone you don't like, that's stimulation. Venting about them to someone else. And every time you retell the story, you feel your heart rate go up, your breathing get shallow, your fists clench a little. That is your sympathetic nervous system being activated. That is stimulation. Scrolling through someone's Instagram and comparing their life to yours, stimulation. Checking your email for the 15th time before noon because you're anxious about a response, stimulation. The news, the group chat, the drama, all of it. We don't even realize how often we engage in the behavior that revs up our sympathetic nervous system throughout the day. And we've been normalized, right, to the point where we think it's just life. That this is how things are, but it's not. It's how things were designed to be. And there is a massive difference. Real energy, real soul, body, and mind energizing energy comes from nourishment, sleep, sunlight, nutritious food eaten mindfully and without distraction, regular movement, safe and nurturing relationships, regular time outdoors. These are not suggestions. These are the original operating instructions for the human body. And they cannot be replaced by anything man-made. You cannot replace a good night's sleep with caffeine. You cannot replace a real meal and everything that happens in your body during a real meal, right? Because it's not just the food, it's not just the calories. It's how you're eating and what you're doing while you're eating it. You cannot replace all of that with a sugar-laden protein bar on the go. But that is what we've been sold. Now, I want to talk about the brain because I think when you understand what's actually happening biologically, it stops feeling like a personal failure and it starts feeling like what it is. a very old system being run in a completely new environment. Now, here's the thing, all right? We have a 1,000,000-year-old brain living in a world that has changed more in the last 40 years than it did in the previous 10,000. And that's being generous, right? A lot of the common addictions that we see today, scrolling, video games, weed, substances, shopping, validation seeking, right? Many of these habits, they were really only created or massively accelerated in the last 20 years. Rapid digital development, legalization and reduced stigma around certain substances, the birth of social media. Our brain is still trying to run ancient software on a completely different computing system. And that old software, it is starting to burn out because it no longer works. It is no longer applicable. But evolution takes time, generational time. And with the pace of technological advancement, our bodies don't stand a chance at keeping up naturally. So it falls on us, the conscious energy running this machine, to learn how to override it. So let's go back. Let's go back to when we were hunting and gathering, right? When survival was literally the only goal. Our bodies developed a reward system to make sure that we kept going. Every time that we found food, experienced warmth, connection, love, or comfort, our brain released dopamine. It was a chemical guarantee that we would keep chasing the thing that kept us alive. It was extraordinary, and it was a perfect system for an extraordinarily difficult time. But fast forward to right now. We live in a world where everything, and I mean everything, has been engineered for our pleasure. There is a profitable industry for literally any niche you can think of. Literally any one. Our dopamine system, which was designed to reward us for surviving, is now being hijacked by billion-dollar industries that have mapped out exactly how to trigger it. And here's the cruel part. Our brain doesn't ever say enough. It doesn't have an off switch for this. What it does instead is it reduces the number of sensitivity of dopamine receptors over time so that you need more of the substance to get the same feeling. And that is the biology of addiction. And that is what has created our entire culture of addiction. We have an addiction to alcohol, addiction to weed, addiction to video games, addiction to porn, addiction to shopping, addiction to scrolling, addiction to plastic surgery, addiction to achievement, addiction to food. And what do? We label the people. We call them lazy or gross or a pothead or a drunk. And we shame the individual, and we completely ignore the ecosystem that created the addiction in the first place. Rarely, and I mean rarely, do people stop and ask, why is this a design? Who benefits from all of this? And this is where I want to talk about the system. And I want to be very clear. You know, when I say things like the system, I'm not coming from some conspiracy theory place. I'm simply pointing out, right, a logical consequence of what happens when profit is prioritized over people. When oil rigs get built over clean drinking water. When dollars get counted over lives. These are not fringe ideas. These are the predictable, documented consequences of late-stage capitalism. Our dependence on constant stimulation, constant dopamine, constant external validation, this is not an accident. It is a feature, not a bug. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the media landscape, right? Think about just recently the shift from long-form content to short-form content. Things are under a minute now. We have to grab someone's attention within the first 10 seconds or less before they scroll on to the next reel, the next video, the next post. The transformation from long, thoughtfully curated art to AI is absolutely wild. But that is what the system created. Because attention is currency. And shorter, louder, more provocative content keeps you on the platform longer, which generates more ad revenue, which keeps the machine running. And it goes beyond entertainment, right? Advertising's entire purpose, the whole architecture of it, is to make you feel like you are lacking something so that their product can fill the gap. It is stimulation being sold as nourishment. They are manufacturing desire, and once you see that mechanism, once you really understand that your desire itself can be engineered, you start to get a lot of your power back. Now, we've been living in the world of the influencer for nearly 20 years. Now, there's this return to what is natural, real, and genuine. But here's what I want you to notice. These are all just cycles. Ebbs and flows that are all driving the same gigantic machine of capitalism. Regardless of which part of the cycle you're participating in, right? You're still feeding into consumption. And that is why the most radical thing that you can do is be 100% yourself. Because you cannot be marketed to if you already know who you are. Now, I want to bring it back to the everyday because I don't want this to feel like some abstract idea, right? Stimulation isn't just the obvious addictions that we've mentioned today. It's woven into our daily lives in ways that feel completely normal, even virtuous. Hustle culture, right? And the illusion of productivity. Hustle culture has repackaged stimulation as a virtue. Busyness feels like purpose. Exhaustion feels like dedication. Your coffee becomes a personality trait. Overworking becomes a badge of honor, but here's the truth. Exhaustion is not the same as fulfillment. They feel nothing alike, and yet we keep confusing them. This is why so many high achievers feel hollow. They've been running on stimulation, not nourishment. They hit every goal and still feel empty because the tank was never actually full to begin with. Comparison as a stimulant, right? It's another one that we don't recognize. When we compare ourselves to other people, right, by wealth, by intelligence, by weight, personality, achievements, and we feel like we're on the losing side, we get anxious, right? We feel behind, and that anxiety activates the sympathetic nervous system. That is stimulation. The stress response is the stimulant. And then there are parasocial relationships, right? I mean, we follow strangers online like we genuinely know them. And we get dopamine hits from likes and comments and follower counts, right? From people we've never even met. But none of that actually replaces the nourishment of real human intimacy, of being truly seen, right? Held, known by another person. Parasocial bonds are stimulants masquerading as community, and a lot of people are surviving on that alone right now. They are deeply lonely, but they feel busy because their phone is always full. Their calendar's always full. And lastly, gossip, right? Every time that you retell a story about someone who wronged you, every time you feel that little rush of self-righteousness when someone agrees with you, that is stimulation. And it's keeping you attached to something that is costing you your own energy. Now, we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but I do want to kind of talk about real quickly what is actually happening in your body, all right, when it's stimulated. Because most people don't realize that chronic overstimulation, it keeps the body locked in sympathetic mode, right? What most people will call fight or flight. And depending on your trauma history, it might be fight, it might be flight, it might be fawn, it might be freeze. But the point is, you are stuck there and you don't even know it because it's become your baseline. Some common symptoms that your sympathetic nervous system has been activated are things like your heartbeat increases. Your breathing becomes a bit shallower, right? And it comes from the chest rather than from your diaphragm, your belly. It could be muscle tension, sweating, right? Upset stomach, maybe cold hands or feet. Being easily started, that one is a huge one, right? If you jump up at every little sound, that means your body is on high alert all the time. It thinks there is a threat. And then there's that anxiety, right? Which is just chronic sympathetic activation looking for a reason to react. Now, here's the crucial part. You can only truly receive nourishment when you are in parasympathetic mode. This is your rest and digest state, right? When you are there, your breathing becomes deeper and slower, right? From the diaphragm, not from the chest. Your muscles relax, your digestion improves, inflammation decreases. Your body starts to actually heal and restore. You make better decisions, you're present. And this is why so many people eat and still feel empty, right? They're eating while they're scrolling, while distracted. And your body literally cannot absorb nourishment the way it's designed to when it thinks it's under threat. The food goes in, but the restoration doesn't happen because the system is not in receiving mode. True nourishment, real rest, deep connection, right? Stillness can only be received in a parasympathetic state, which means learning to regulate your nervous system is not a luxury. It is the whole foundation. All right. So what does nourishment actually look like? And I want to be real here, right? This is not a list of things to add to your already overscheduled life, right? This is about subtraction as much as addition, right? So let's talk a little bit about emotional hunger versus physical hunger. And this is something that has shifted a lot for me personally. You know, we rarely reach for stimulants when we are genuinely physically hungry, right? We reach for them when we are emotionally hungry, bored, anxious, lonely, grieving, overstimulated. The practice is learning to pause before you reach for your phone, for the drink, for the snack, and ask yourself, what am I actually hungry for right now? Not what do I want? What do I actually need? Because that pause is a radical act of self-awareness. It sounds small, but it is enormous. We have collectively lost our tolerance for boredom over the years, and that is one of the greatest losses of this era because boredom is actually where creativity lives. So where self-awareness is born, right? And when genuine rest actually happens, the discomfort you feel when you sit in silence, when there's nothing to do, when you're not being entertained, that discomfort is worth examining. Like, what are you so afraid of to feel when the noise stops? Because whatever that is where the real work is. You know, when it comes to silence and solitude, in almost every spiritual and wisdom tradition across human history, right, across every culture, every country, silence and solitude are considered essential to the human experience, right? Things like meditation, prayer, fasting, time in nature. These aren't ancient quirks where we've evolved past, right? These are technologies for recalibrating the system. They are the original form of nourishment, but instead we've traded all of them for a scroll. And then there's the basics that aren't actually basic at all, right? Things like sufficient sleep, sunlight on the skin, nutritious food eaten slowly without a screen, regular movement, real relationships where you are genuinely known, time spent outside, right? These are not optional lifestyle upgrades. These are what your body runs on. Everything else is a substitute. Now, I want to go a little deeper because everything that we've talked about today has an inner dimension that I don't want to skip over. Right? Our souls are not of this earth, but we can only operate in this third dimensional world through our bodies. Essentially, we're running this machine, and the machine has been hijacked. But we are not the machine. And that distinction, knowing you are the driver, not the car, that is where everything changes. Now, when something in your life makes you annoyed, angry, jealous, bitter, right, guilty, ashamed, vengeful, or afraid, the invitation is to stop and ask, what is this trying to teach me about me right now? Because those emotions are signals. They are pointing at something from your past that hasn't been reconciled with yourself yet. Something or some part that still needs to be seen, examined, held with compassion. I'll give you an example. Sometimes we see someone from afar who seems to have it all, right? Confident, wealthy, beautiful, kind. And instead of recognizing that what we're feeling is actually fear that we ourselves can't reach that level of embodiment, we turn into jealousy, right? And we start trying to bring them down, gossiping or purposefully misinterpreting them, getting others to agree with our narrative of them. And here's the truth. A person who is spiritually aligned cannot be touched by any of that. They are held, they are protected. And all we've done is create more negative energy in our own lives. The person you were targeting went home just fine that day. You're the one who's sick, right? So it is my soul's mission, and I hope it becomes yours, right? To develop a level of discernment that is so formidable that no external storm, no matter how violent or how strong, can shake my foundation. And we get there through knowing ourselves, not just the good parts, all of it. The parts we're proud of and the parts we're ashamed of. The shadow, the triggers, the reactions. We look at all of it from a place of compassion and not judgment. And through that process, we begin to know instantly in our bodies, not just our minds, what is stimulation versus what is nourishment. And I want to say this clearly. This is not me being on a high horse, right? I do these things still. I still reach for my phone sometimes when I should sit still, right? I still have moments where I numb instead of feel. But I am conscious of it now, and I am studying myself. And all the things in moderation. I genuinely believe that everything on this earth was created for our consumption and our happiness. And as long as we are the ones choosing it consciously, I think it's okay. The question is, are you making the choice, or is the choice making you? We live in a world that is built to overstimulate us so that we walk around unconscious of our decisions. That is what chronic overstimulation does to our bodies. It numbs our sensitivity so that we seek more, and over time, we are reaching for stimulants incessantly, seamlessly, unconsciously. But you are not unconscious anymore. That's why you're here. That's the work. I'll leave you with the anchor for today's episode, which is what soothes you reveals what you're avoiding. So sit with that, right? And the next time that you reach for something to soothe yourself, whether it's a glass of wine, a joint, a video game, right? Shopping, just pause for 1 second and ask, what am I actually avoiding right now? You don't have to do anything with the answer yet. Just let yourself hear it. Thank you so much for being here. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a review if you feel moved to. It genuinely helps the show reach more people who are doing this work. And I'll see you all next week. Please take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And remember that you are not what you consume. You are simply by being.